G'day and welcome back to Tomo's Tune-Ups. On this episode, we're going to get back on the Yamaha quad bike just over my shoulder. It is absolutely stinking hot, so this giant fan down here is going to be running. So I apologise if there is quite a lot of background noise, but as I said, it is stinking hot today. So we're going to be pulling off the cylinder head from the quad bike. So we're going to try and ascertain as to why it is burning so much oil. Inside the exhaust you can actually see quite a lot of oil residue, so it's definitely leaking from inside here, whether it's going to be valve stem seals, which I probably assume it's going to be, or even piston rings. So it really just depends, but let's start by removing the cylinder head and the covers, get the timing chain off, and then we can start to figure out why this is burning so much oil. I also forgot to mention as well, whilst taking it off, two of the exhaust studs decided to break off inside there, so we're going to have to renew those, and I'll show you how to do that. Alright, so I have the appropriate attire on. As you can see, I've got my Chinese work boots and I have my phone as well. I downloaded the workshop manual to my phone. It only cost me about 30 bucks, so really good useful tip here is to go online, see if you can find owner's manuals for specific things, whether it be cars, bikes, boats, engines, whatever. It'll certainly help you with the disassembly and the tune-up stage, and even maintenance as well. So the first thing we need to do is remove the spark plug and the cam chain tensioner assembly. So spark plug is on this side and the cam chain tensioner is this one here. Alright, always best to grab yourself a magnetic tray or a dish or a cup, something just to put everything in once you pull it apart. Alright, so just going to turn it around just so you can see. I'm just going to remove the spark plug, and I've got the wrong size socket. Oh, of course. So sometimes you find spark plugs are different size sockets, so you just need to find the right one to suit it if it's not the standard small or large size that you have in your kit. Alright, so in my case it is a deep 18mm 3/8 socket that we're going to be using to remove it. Alright, so remember that a spark plug tells a story. So with this one you can see quite clearly, hopefully it's clear in the video, it hasn't been burning well whatsoever. There's heaps of carbon on there and there's probably a lot of oil as well, so that's the reason why it's running the way it is, because of the oil contamination inside the cylinder head. Alright, so we just spin it back around again. Now the next step is going to be, according to the instructions, we need to remove the select lever, so this one here between each of the ball joints, and then there's going to be 6 bolts that hold this side cover on, so we're going to start to remove those next. Remember as well that whenever you're working on stuff like this, plenty of penetrant is always going to be your best friend. Now here's another one of Tomo's tech tips. When you can't get a bolt or a screw out, grab yourself a hammer and a screwdriver, give it a couple of taps to help free it up, and then she'll come loose. Alternatively, if you have a impact screwdriver, that works even better. Alright, so that timing case cover will just pull straight off. So nice and dry there, doesn't look like there's been any oil leaks, which is nice. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is remove this selector rod here. So, looks like that's probably pressed on there somehow. And instead of us destroying it trying to take it off, I'll just pull this boot back and have a bit of a look. Yeah, so I don't really want to force that because it looks like it's pressed on there somehow. That's fine, that's no dramas. So what we need to do now is remove it. So we're going to remove this whole mechanism just here, along with this bolt here as well, and that'll enable it to come all the way off. Now, like I've said before on multiple occasions, it's always good to have an assortment of tools. So these are long Allen key sockets, and they've also got a ball on the end. So they're 3/8 drive, which makes it really convenient and handy to work on a lot of stuff. So it's just a matter of finding the right one and then using it accordingly. Really good thing about this is it enables quite a large angle to be able to get inside the socket as well with the ball. Alright, so that's just the mount, and that comes straight off as an assembly. So to make the next part a little bit easier, we're just going to lean back the engine backwards, grab a rubber block and just jam it underneath it, just so we've got a little bit more room. So now that we've propped it up, the next thing we're going to do is remove the selector lever and then remove this side cover. So I've just got a permanent marker. We're just going to mark it just so we know where it came off and we can realign it. Now this is an adjustment as well that you can make down the track, so we don't necessarily have to mark it, but just to make it easier for future reference. Alright, so a couple of Phillips heads over here. Oh, that one's quite loose. Hopefully it hasn't always been like that. Now the thing with working on motorbikes and even quad bikes is a lot of the stuff is quite small and is very basic tooling that you need. So make sure if you're going to be doing this sort of stuff, you have the right tools for the job. All right, off she comes. So that's in pretty good nick. There's nothing really wrong with that, which is nice. All right, next step is to remove the camshaft pulley nut. So all we need to do is grab a 7mm socket. We're going to grab the DAC and then just send it. There we are. So keep that off to the side. All right, so you probably can't see here, but there is a line just above this notch here. So I imagine that's probably something to do with the timing. So it hasn't told us to time it, but before we remove the head, we're just going to line up that mark with this little notch cut out at the top. That way we know it's at 12 o'clock when you pull it off. Now they said it's not necessary to remove the chain off the sprocket, but we're going to have to remove the sprocket off the top of the camshaft. So what we're going to do is grab a cable tie and just cable tie the chain to the sprocket. That way it's not going to move whatsoever. So that'll just pull straight out like that. And this is a really good idea, that if you are having to remove a specific component and you need to take it off, but you don't want the chain to come off from the gear, just grab yourself a cable tie and then just tighten it all the way up. That way it'll secure it and prevent it moving. You will still need to redo the timing, but it is just a really good idea to make sure it's not going to come off or fall. Now that should, be able to remove with the head as well. So there's enough gap down there that we can remove the top of the head and it's not going to interfere whatsoever with the cam timing chain. All right, so spin the engine around again. Now there are 6 bolts. So there's 4 at the top and then 2 Allen keys here as well. So we're going to crack all of these by hand and then remove the cylinder head. Now I did a bit of prior reading and these cylinder head bolts aren't done up to anything more than 22 Newton meters. So it's not a great deal. So it shouldn't take a lot to crack them. All right, so that feels a bit firm. I'm just going to get a shorter Allen key socket for that one. So using that long socket is really good, but you do run the risk of it rounding off because it doesn't have enough surface area to touch. So by shortening the socket, it increases the torque as well. So just tap that down there, just to make sure she's home. And then that'll come off. All right, so I'm just gonna grab a 12mm and just rattle those off from the top. Now remember, the head bolt's gonna be quite long, so when you take them out, this is the reason why you can't take them out with it in the bike. Alright, so that one's, oh no, it's got a wash on it. They've also got washers on them, so make sure that they come off with them as well. So now that we've loosened those, we can just get the rattle gun on there and take them off. Now you probably find as well, underneath the cylinder head will be a heap of dowel pins, so that's what will help locate it onto the engine. Okay. So as you can see here, oh, just dropped the nut. As you can see here, so this one is your inlet valve and that is your exhaust valve. So by the look of all the carbon build up here, it's likely going to be the valve stem seal. So we're going to have to pull the top of that apart and have a look. So I think it'd probably be this cover here and the one on this side as well. As for the piston, it doesn't look too bad. So I'll just grab the camera and I'll show everyone. So there is a little bit of carbon buildup on there. It's not overly bad, like it's pretty standard really. And there's also a small arrow down here as well, so it denotes which way it faces, so towards the starter motor. Alright, so next thing, we just need to remove this dampener that they reckon, which is just a timing chain guide. So that's not in too bad a condition. You can see where it's been running along here. We've got a new one of those, I think, coming, so it'd be worthwhile putting that in. So that'll go straight in the bin. As for the other guide, that'll probably stay there. That's timing chain will stay there as well. Now, it does have a multi-layer head gasket, so there's 3 layers in there. So we'll take that one off, throw that straight in the bin. And it's also worth noting, here we go. So there's a dowel, and it's also got a O-ring around there as well. So we need to make sure that we renew those. That should be in the VRS kit. Now here's a really bit of useful information. The word VRS in VRS kit actually stands for valve regrind set. So never knew that until most recently when we did a bit of investigating on them. So now there's just 2 Allen keys that'll hold the cylinder bore on, whatever it's called. I'm sure someone in the comments can confirm to me exactly what this is. The sleeve, whatever. 2 bolts, and then that'll just pull straight off, and then we can replace the piston and hopefully get onto the cylinder head. Alright, so love their bloody Allen keys. So just got to make sure they come off nice and easy. Yep, they're both good. So this bike will do with a hell of a do-use when we're done. Clean everything up. Any extra oil leaks and stuff that we find, my parents have pretty much just said just sort it out, which is really quite nice. Okay, so there we go, a little bit of wiggling, and then that'll pull straight up. So the guide will come out, followed by the chain. Oh, hopefully the engine's not going to just fall off. I don't think so, but there we go. Alright, now, it said we didn't need to remove the cam chain from the gear, but looks like we might have to. Let's just cheat a little bit. We're just going to pull the chain off from the guide. Sorry, pull the chain off from the sprocket, and then it will pull straight out. There we go. Alright, so there's your bore, your cylinder, whatever it is that you're called. So that looks really quite nice. There's no real signs of any scoring or pitting. There is a little bit of carbon built up around the top, but that's pretty normal for a standard engine, not just motorbikes, but you know, other cars and stuff as well. Alright, so it's also worth noting down below here also appears to be a couple of other dowels. Looks like there's an O-ring here and there's another O-ring there, so that's actually a gasket. Oh yeah, so there's a gasket there, we need to replace that. So that's on the list of things. That'll be in the VRS kit, so we'll stick that off to the side and then we can suss out the piston and everything else. Alright, so spin that around. Shouldn't be able to fall off. That's good. Alright, so just stick that off to the side. Whenever you have an engine open, try and get some rags or something to stick down in there. That way you're not going to drop components in there. Especially we're about to remove this gudgeon pin. So what secures the conrod to the piston? Well, we're about to remove these circlips. So the last thing we want is to drop the circlip down inside the cylinder, or inside the casing, should I say, because it'd be an absolute nightmare to try and get out. Alright, so these just have a circlip. We should be able to just pull it up just a little bit, release it from the piston, and then just pull it out. We do have new circlips. Yeah, sweet. Now that gudgeon pin, hopefully, depends which way it pulls out. Sometimes you can release the circlip that holds it and it will push straight out. Other times you need to remove both. Oh, okay. So there we go. Out she comes. And then she comes straight off. Alright, so that gudgeon pin has definitely seen better days. As I said, the piston's not too bad. There's not really much wrong with it. The oil scraper ring doesn't really have a lot of tension on it as well, so it could even just be the fact that these small holes here, in through the journal, oil's getting channeled and sprayed up through here, so it's going to line the cylinder wall, so it's going to help to prevent the piston generating too much heat and then seizing inside the bore, so it's lightly filming the cylinder bore. So it could even be that if the oil scraper hasn't been doing its job properly, because there isn't enough spring tension on there. The oil is just traveling directly past both of the compression rings and then resulting in the oil going up through the cylinder. But it could also be the valve stem seals, valve guides, it could be several different things, but this to me, there's not a lot of spring tension on that, so that would not surprise me if that was majority of the problem. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we've got the cylinder head. We're going to remove the tappet cover on each side. We're then going to remove the collets for the top of the springs. We're going to take the collets out. We're going to remove the valve stem seal and replace it. I'm sure someone in the comments will tell me how much I'm doing this wrong by, and you know what, I probably am. There's probably a specific sequence or a special tool or something you need to be able to do this, but you know what, as I said before, it is just a quad bike we're only using for agricultural reasons, so it's not like it's going on the MotoGP circuit and needs to be 1,000,000,000% right. Alright, so that one's going to be a little bit tricky. Give it a tap with a hammer to make sure she recesses all the way home so we don't strip it. And off she comes. Now we also need to make sure that we remove and replace these old gaskets as well. So this one here has, yeah, it's all right, not overly great, but probably not the best thing. Also, while we're here, we're going to have to adjust the tappet clearance as well while it's cold. So we're just going to loosen off the nut and then hopefully be able to lift it up high enough, push the top of the valve spring down, get the collets out, and then remove everything from the internals. So I'd imagine this would be something similar to adjusting the tappets on your Mini or your car, whatever it is that you're driving. Yeah, so it's got a little square there that you just adjust the valve clearance. So I've got those specs as well. We can do that when we reassemble it. So take that out. Now it looks like we might need to remove the pins for the rocker shaft. Alright, so there's a rocker shaft inside here. On this side, I'll show you inside here. So where I've put this bolt, the rocker shaft goes inside there. There is a threaded section, so I've just put a bolt inside there, give it a bit of a pull, and that'll come straight out. So once you've pulled the rocker shaft out, you can then remove the rocker arm. Oh, cool. There we are. So it's got an O-ring at the end as well. Got to make sure we renew that if we have a new one. Pull the rocker arm out if it decides to want to come. Probably not. Nah, but that's fine. We can just push it in there. Now to remove the collets, so I'm going to try and cheat here. Get a pair of long nose pliers. Should be able to push it down far enough to remove the collets, and then away we go. All right, so we're going to have to support the bottom of the valve to stop it moving in order for us to get it out. All right, so all I'm going to do is just get a socket down under there, hopefully put it on enough of an angle where it's not going to push down. Yep. So as I said before, this is not the right way to do it. As I said, there is likely a proper tool and a method. You can buy special tools to compress these. Obviously I don't have one, but this is a different way in which you can do it if you don't have the tools. Alright, we'll just try a different pair of pliers. Hopefully we can do this. If not, we might need to buy the tool to be able to compress it. Yeah, so just because of how awkward it is, I may not be able to compress it properly. Alright, so that's not going to work. I might just have to go and see if I can borrow a tool from work to be able to compress the spring to be able to get the valve stem seal out. So I might just try one quick thing. As I said before, this is not advised, but sometimes, and this is what I did with my Mini, you can push down with a socket and the collets will come out. Alright, so I did manage to get the collets out. So the collets are what holds the valve spring to the valve itself. So there will be two of those, so we just have to find where the other one went. I think from memory, reading the instructions, it has double row valve springs, which it does. So we just pull those out nice and slowly. Okay, so the other collet has actually gone up inside the socket. Because it's magnetic, it's held it, which is fantastic. So to reassemble this, I think I will get the valve spring compressing tool. So we're just going to have a look down inside the top of the valve now as well. So down inside here, where this top of the valve is, there's a seal down below there. So I'll pull that out and we'll just have a quick look. It's going to be made of rubber, so it's probably going to be the reason why this thing is chewing so much oil. So I wouldn't be surprised if we took this off and it was bloody rock hard. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so down on the inside of the seal, it appears to be a bit torn, so that could likely be it. The top is still quite moist, but then he's saying that this garter ring that goes around the outside, that's what holds the tension on the valve. So if that has lost its spring tension, any oil that's traveling down through here, it's just going to travel straight through. Also, a really good indication to know that it's been leaking is to see if it's wet on the inside. So as you can see there, hopefully, it is quite wet. So that's a good indication to know that it has been leaking. All right, so there are two springs, like I was saying before. There's an inner and outer spring, so we're going to measure each length of them using a set of vernier calipers. So I'm just going to take these out of the packet and then we can use them. All right, so we just need to zero it. Now the inside spring needs to be 33.5, so we'll measure that. And if it is out of tolerance, then we need to replace it. So it's measured at 3509, so that appears to be within spec, which is great. So it's still going to hold spring tension, which is mad, and then the outer spring as well. So this one needs to be 35.2. All right, so we're at 37.21, I guess would probably be your best bet. So they're both fine, so it's holding enough spring tension, which is mad. All right, so we got our new VRS kit. So everything we need or should need is hopefully in this container. So we've got the new valve stem seals, so we'll put those in now and try to reassemble it as it is. If not, we're gonna have to get a spring compression tool. Grab the new valve stem seals. Usually this would be done by a cylinder head specialist, but in our case, obviously we can do it ourselves, which is not a problem whatsoever. So that stem seal is gonna go directly down here first. So just work it all the way down through there, and then we're just going to push it all the way home. All right, so that seal just pushed in by hand. We can make sure the operation of the valve is good. It's not going to pull the seal out at all, so that's great, really. So that's pretty much done everything we need to. Now we can start the reassembly process. So we're going to grab our smaller inside spring first, followed by the larger outside spring. Now is going to come the fun part and make sure that we do not lose the collets. So these two little suckers right here. So we need to apply a bit of pressure, pushing down, and then we need to slide these in. Actually, before we start the reassembly process, I'm just going to take the valve out. You can see all this debris all the way around here. So I'm just going to get a little bit of light emery paper and we're just going to clean that valve right up. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is do piston ring gap. Now it's crucial that when you are checking new pistons and rings that you ensure the ring gap is correct. Now if they are not correct and the gap is too small, once it expands and heats up, it will then touch each other, which will then cause drag on the piston ring itself, therefore overheating the piston and causing excessive friction. Whereas if the piston has too much of a gap, it can then cause too much blow by, which then you are going to lose cylinder pressure. Now we're just going to remove the old ones and we're going to measure them. So I'd imagine the first and second ring probably won't have that much wear in them, but I'm expecting the third ring to have even more and probably causing the oil consumption issue. Now these can be a bit difficult to get off, but because they're the old ones, I'm not overly fussed. If it breaks, then, you know, it doesn't really matter too much. So it's important also to make sure that you keep the piston rings separated. So as they come off in their order or even going to go on, just make sure that you know where they are, and that way you can ensure that they're going to be doing the right job. So this is number 2, so this is going to go over here, and then the oil scraper ring. So we're just going to take one of these off, and that should give us a pretty good indication. The oil scraper ring is always significantly smaller than the others, so we can't really get this wrong. Okay, so now that we have them off the piston, that's great. So what we want to be doing is essentially just grabbing the ring and sliding it inside the bore. Now, you're probably wondering, how is it that you get it so it's completely symmetrical and it's square to the cylinder? What you're going to do is just grab your piston, just slide it down until you're happy with a fairly uniform spot. In this case, it's going to be right here because it's sitting on the other piston ring. Now we're going to measure the gap at the end of the ring. So you can just see it there. That gap there is what we're going to be measuring. Alright, so we've got our new rings. We are going to install them into the bore, and then we're just going to double check the ring gap as well. So once again, we'll just use the piston to help centralize it. That is heaps. Alright, so I've just fitted the new piston ring for the top, and the gap is significantly wide here, so you can even see on the camera how wide it is. So what I did was just grab the new piston. This is just a standard size piston. If we put it in, you can see how much free play there is in there. So what we need to do is fit the old piston and then see how much of a gap there is. So it's moving significantly less. So we've been given the wrong size piston, so we need to measure this one, compare it to the new one, and then get the right one sent. But also we will need to do a couple of measurements to find out if this is the right size piston for it and the exact piston size that we actually need as per the specifications. Alright, so we've run into a couple of problems here. So the first one is the piston size. So this isn't the correct tool to use. We really need to be using a micrometer. But if we measure this here, the width of the skirt, so we're at 70.96 millimeters. Now, according to the instructions, this piston is equivalent to the oversized number 4, which is 71 millimeters. So we're pretty much right at the very end of the oversized bore for this engine. Now, if we measure the new piston, the same measurements, we go back. So we're at 69.97. So it's pretty much a whole millimeter different between the old and the new one. Now, that comes out as a standard piston, so 69 mil is approximately a standard piston for this engine. So this one has been oversized, so maybe it was replaced in the past, maybe it had a large piston to start with. It's really hard to tell. So the piston we've been supplied is too small. I'm going to give this a little bit of a clean, put it back in the box, and then send it back, and then we can keep going with it. Alright, so I went and grabbed a valve spring compressing tool. So you pick these up fairly cheap from your local auto parts store. They have an adjustable length here as well, so you can adjust it to suit the length of the valve. And then the quick release handle there, and that's also what locks it in and compresses the spring. Also down here as well, you just need to adjust this depending on the thickness of the spring. So if it's too big, you'll find that it won't push it down properly. So we're just going to trial fit this before we actually go ahead. Alright, cool. So that should pretty much do it. So what we're going to do, we've already installed our new valve stem seal. Alright, so a really good indication to show that the valve has been seating is this ring around the outside. So that's where it's been seating up against the inside of the head. What will happen sometimes is along the seat here where the valve sits, there'll be that much carbon build up that as the valve is compressing, the carbon is getting jammed between the valve and the seat, therefore resulting in the pressure of the cylinder being left out. So what will happen there is you'll find that it won't be holding pressure because there's too much carbon on the seat. Okay, so what we need to do, these are a little bit fiddly to use. I haven't used one since I went to TAFE many years ago. So we're going to fit one side to the back of the valve, and then the other one is going to go on the top of the spring. So fit both of the valve springs there. So that hasn't compressed it. We just got to go again. I think I need to adjust it. We're almost there. So it is a little bit off center, probably because of the narrowness along here. So between the actual tool and the arm, so you can see it up in there. It's not 100% straight, but it might be alright that we can slide the collets in. Ideally, you want to be pushing these down as square as possible. But like I said, We'll see how we go putting these in. They may or may not work. I'm not overly confident about it working this time around. We might just need to give it another shot, I reckon. Alright, so welcome back. The awkward moment when you realise that the GoPro has run out of memory card space and you miss the entire thing. So probably a good thing we didn't go through and film all this, because it probably took me about 45 minutes. Now, the problem that we're having was we couldn't push the spring down far enough to push the collets in. So what I eventually ended up doing was getting a couple of spacer washers and just spacing it on the top, putting the tool on top of it, pushing it down, then inserting the collets in there, releasing the tool, and then it's fine. So yeah, as I said, good thing I didn't film it, because it was an absolute pain in the butt to be able to do this job. But usually it's not this hard, especially when you don't have all of the tools. There are two different types of tools you can buy for this particular job, but moving forward, we got it done. There is a little bit of scratching done along here, but that's fine. It's only on the inside, so where the seal actually runs is on the outside of the surface here, and you can slightly see the witness mark where it used to run. So we'll clean that up before we put the new gasket on, and then we can start moving forward. But before we go and do the other side, Tomo's tech tip of the day: make sure that when you do a job like this, you take photos of absolutely everything, every bolt, nut, washer, bracket, whatever it may be. Only because when you go to put stuff back together, you can then guarantee that you've done it the right way. If you're unsure of how something goes, instead of you having to look up diagrams and go back and try and figure it out, you can just refer back to pictures. Now, when you're doing collets, it is important and imperative to make sure that they are in all the way. If they aren't, and one is sitting slightly proud compared to the other one, as soon as the rocker arm goes on there and goes to push down the valve, the collet will pop out. Therefore, the spring will come off, the valve will drop in the cylinder, bang, see you later, engine. So this is very important that you get this right to begin with. So let's do the other side.
Ice in my veins, I've been driving this train. Years in this lane, there's no stopping this flame. Cause I came to the game and I changed it to play how I like, rearranged it to my own domain. Yeah, I got what it takes, made lots of mistakes, taking shots, skipping breaks, feeling lost, feeling great, popping off, singing straight, never stopped, never changed. All the squad here to play, and I've got something to say, yeah. I work hard each and every day, I get lost in the words I say. I don't push pause, no, I push play. I won't stop till I make a change. I withdraw on the things I make. I turn flaws into flawless traits. I build tall, never capped in space. I won't stop till I hear him say,
Alright, so as you can see here, the collets are in, a little bit of screwing around, and they're recessed all the way in there. One is not higher than the other, which is great. We're pretty much right to start the reassembly process now. So what I'm going to do is, before I've spoken about using some upper engine cleaner, the Subaru stuff, it's called 3-Bond upper engine conditioner, I believe. So as you can see, there's quite a large amount of soot and debris and just crap down here. So we're going to soak that overnight while we wait for the new piston to come in. So I'll get some of that from work and probably even just order some. Actually, while we're here, it is important as well that we need to drill these out. So I'm going to show you guys the best way to be able to drill out a broken stud. Also inside here, there is a gasket, so we need to renew it, which will be in the kit. So if you just give me 1 second, this one here is what we need to renew. So that one just goes directly in there, so we can just remove that old one. So always, before you pull stuff apart and go ham on it and decide to try and get it out, always make sure that you've got new parts available to you before you start taking it out, and that you can actually get them. Otherwise, sometimes you find you pull something out and then you can't obtain it. A bit like when I did the primary gear, I think it was, on the Morris 850, we removed the bearing from inside, and all the sizes that we found online were completely different to the actual size that I needed. So I had to go get a bearing specifically made for that one, which didn't cost a great deal of money, but at the end of the day, if I'd known that, I probably wouldn't have touched it, because the old bearing was actually all right. Alright, so we'll just take out all that old crap, throw that in the bin so we don't get it mixed up with the new one. And then we can, so what we might do is just start the reassembly process. for the rest of the cylinder head. So as you saw before, we pulled the camshaft out, which is this sucker just here. So, just got to make sure we reinstall it correctly, and then we can install the rocker arms as well. So with this, it's also noted that this little notch needs to come off to the side because it's got a little tab down here as well that locates it and helps it to lock straight in and prevents it spinning. Alright, so now that we've made sure that this little lock tab is locked in, we need to remove that because we need to install the inlet side rocker shaft.
6 a.m. and I'm up again. I got tired eyes, need a cup of blend. That's right, in the AM, that's my only friend. No light, just the sun coming up on the horizon. I lose track of time, yeah, I move fast and climb a new class divine, yeah, true passion shines. And I'm through passing time, I choose stacking dimes. You snooze half the time.
Alright, so we're going to start by doing the exhaust clearance first for the tappet. So we need it to be between 0.11 and 0.15 of a millimeter. So we'll take it all the way down to the smallest one. Okay, so probably the smallest I can go is 0.12, so that's pretty good. We'll set it to that. So like I've showed you before on the video, adjusting my tappets, if you haven't already seen it, there's a link in the above description, probably up this way, showing you how to do it. So check it out if you haven't. We'll just adjust this accordingly. Okay, a little bit of drag. Yep, perfect. Alright, so you just need to nip that, you don't have to swing off it. Alright, so that's great. We'll just take it up to the largest one and see how it is. So 0.15, so this one here. Just make sure it's not too loose. Yeah, cool. So that's pretty much on par with where we need it to be. So flip it around and we'll do the inlet side as well. So the inlet needs to be between 0.05 and 0.08. So we'll set it to the thickest measurement. So 0.076 is where we're going to be. So loosen off the nut and then we can make our adjustment. So you get your adjustment where you need it to be. So that's pretty much where we need it. Once you're done, nip it up and then double check. Okay, so that's a little loose, so we'll just give it a little bit more. Alright, so we'll just nip this up a little bit more. Alright, there we go. Alright, try again. Yeah, perfect. That's pretty much where we need it to be. It's got a little bit of drag, not too much, but that's pretty much where we need it. Alright, so just double check the tension of both the nuts. Double check that, make sure it hasn't moved. Yep, perfect, that's great. All right, so now we can start reassembling the top half of the engine, so just the two tapper covers on the top. Like I said, we are still waiting on the pistons, so in the meantime, I'm gonna get some stuff to soak the intake and exhaust ports, and then we can keep going with showing you how to drill out the two broken studs.